Member for Oak Bay, Gordon Head.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to take my place in the debate on the hoist amendment, hoist motion brought forward by the members opposite with respect to our discussions on Bill 6, Electoral Reform Referendum Act 2018. Now, Honourable Speaker, I've listened to debate speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker raise issues, and I wonder, after reflecting upon it, if they recognize that we're actually debating a bill who's designed exclusively to create the legal framework for conducting a province-wide referendum before November the 30th, 2018, representing a proportional voting system. Now, Honourable Speaker, what I've heard here in reflecting upon the need for more time is members on the one hand opposite arguing passionately against proportional representation for reasons and rationale that preclude them actually, that are based on them actually knowing the outcome of the consultative process that is ongoing now. On the other hand, I've heard people argue against proportional representation in general. Some of the arguments have gone so far as to be, I would argue, somewhat outlandish. One member opposite stated, and I quote, I mean, this is so inappropriate. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. You ended up with World War II. You ended up with a Holocaust. You ended up with a number of countries that had to rebuild, meaning all of Europe. Many of you, of the people that come to Canada, should know this, because most of your ancestors came from Europe. Honourable Speaker, this is the member from Skeena who stood up and in arguing against letting the people of British Columbia decide whether or not we should have a referendum, or whether or not they would support proportional representation, evokes the fact that this could potentially lead to the rise of Nazis and a Holocaust? Honourable Speaker, this is so profoundly offensive that I honestly believe that member should stand and apologize to the legislature for those comments. The member opposite said I was taking it out of context. I encourage anyone here to go and read the Hansard because it was not taken out of context, Honourable Speaker. It was there for all to see. Now, Honourable Speaker, this entire debate on both sides has boiled down to one question. And that one question is this: do we trust the people of British Columbia to actually determine the outcome of how their democracy would like to be? This is not...
Member speaking to the amendment.
Honourable Speaker, I do appreciate you saying that, but I've listened again to speaker after speaker give speeches without referring to the amendment a single time during their speech. I have referred to the amendment many times already in this speech, yet the previous speakers have not. I will continue to speak to the amendment and the reason why we don't need to have the extra time. But I do reflect upon the fact that I did not hear other members do that in speaking to the amendment. Coming back to the amendment, coming back to the rationale, we've had this debate boiling down to one on this amendment, as well as on the motion before that. To one question: do we trust the people of British Columbia? Members opposite don't seem to believe that we can trust the peoples of British Columbia to actually determine whether or not they want proportional representation. They don't believe that we can trust the people of British Columbia to determine the outcome. Their arguments against proportional representation and the need to consult further are compelling to themselves and their groups and their friends, perhaps, and vote no if there is a referendum. But we're not debating proportional representation. We're debating whether or not, this one question, do we trust British Columbians to have a say? And do we need another 6 months to actually go through? So, Honourable Speaker, we know, Honourable Speaker, the reason why members opposite have turned this debate onto whether or not British Columbians are entitled to a choice into a debate on proportional representation. And it's because fundamentally, to quote their future leader, Diane Watts, the following. You know, on November the 4th, 2017, she said this. Because they said this. Because you know what? If we do not defeat this referendum, there will be no majority. There will forever be a minority of BC Liberals. She also said, that is my number one priority, and I'm hell-bent in terms of making sure that we defeat that referendum. Now, therein lies the problem, Honourable Speaker. This hoist motion that's before us now is nothing about proportional representation. It's about fear. Fear that the BC Liberals will actually tear apart. And actually, British Columbians, who we're here to serve, will have a better choice as to who they want to represent them. You know, I have friends in the BC Conservative Party. I've got friends in the BC Liberal Party. I've got friends in the BC NDP. There is an unhealthy tension over there right now, Honourable Speaker. An unhealthy tension because there's a struggle for voices by members within that party. The whole purpose of proportional representation is to not create artificial coalitions, but to allow the society to be reflected in terms of the makeup of the people who represent them in government. Again, the members opposite, who we sat quite patiently listening, and it was trouble quite at some time, feel very uncomfortable. Feel very uncomfortable when the truth is pointed out. The truth that this is only about whether we trust British Columbians or not. They don't. They don't trust British Columbians. They need more time, throw a hoist motion forward, and in doing so, what you're basically doing is killing the bill. We all know that a hoist motion is killing the bill, and that's the purpose of this. They want to kill the bill because they don't trust British Columbians to actually determine the outcome of what they think is best. They don't trust British Columbians to vote yes or no on proportional representation because the BC Liberals know, they know the answer. Members opposite are hung up on process. They're hung up on process. What is ironic, this is the uncomfortable nature of the discussion, Honourable Speaker, because the truth hurts. Let's talk about the process, Honourable Speaker, in response to the heckles from West Vancouver Sea to Sky. This is what the process is. There's a 3-month consultative process ongoing right now. There's a 3-month consultative process. I encourage members opposite to do what the BC Greens are doing, and to do, frankly, what the BC NDP are doing, and make your own submissions. I've listened for, must be 2 months now. I don't know how long we've been debating this bill.
Need 6 more.
Member after member after member already say what proportional representation is. I heard one member saying it's ranked lists don't work. Well, your leadership convention is about to go through in terms of a ranked debate, but like I said, works for BC Liberals, but it doesn't work for proportional representation. I've heard others talk about party lists, so you're not actually voting people, and that doesn't work. But again, Honourable Speaker, we don't actually know what the question is. So all this fear, Honourable Speaker, being put forward by the BC Liberals, and through their hoist motion trying to kill this, is basically fear of losing power. Because the BC Liberals care about power, not about doing what's right for the people of British Columbia. The irony, Honourable Speaker, in this as well, as we've heard talk time after time about these so-called backroom negotiations that led to this, well, the irony in that, Honourable Speaker, is the same negotiations were happening with the BC Liberals who agreed to have a referendum in the fall of 2018. So I'm not sure what's... It's interesting that none of these members who actually attended those meetings seem to know exactly what went on the meetings, but I actually was at those meetings, Honourable Speaker. And let me tell you, there was no difference in the discussions that we had between both parties about the importance of having a referendum on proportional representation in light of the fact that this is something that British Columbians had told us was very important to them, as the Prime Minister did, and did as well federally. But let me come back to this again, because here's the irony. I sit through question period day after day, listening to the members opposite hurl abuse at government and say you're not fulfilling a promise. It's hard to hear.
Members.
You're not fulfilling a promise, they would say. This promise is broken, that promise is broken. But here, we have a promise being fulfilled. A promise that the BC NDP campaigned on. They campaigned in the last election on actually having a referendum on proportional representation. And that's what this bill is doing. This bill, Honourable Speaker, is simply enabling a referendum to occur. There's no question being posed yet. There's no structure being posed. It's simply informing a referendum. See, there we have the heckling, Honourable Speaker, coming back to that again, the heckling opposite, saying you need to put the question for it. Well, this points to the scale of their arguments. They're internally inconsistent because on the one hand they want to consult, and we need to have this 6-month hoist in order to consult as to what the question is, but now they're heckling and saying we need to know what the question is now. Honourable Speaker, this is what happens when you have a party that's hurting, and I get that you're hurting. I get that they're hurting, Honourable Speaker. In power for 16 years, now sitting in the benches there. There's internal strife as a few inner elite from the party from the past still dictate the way it will be, and others don't know what's happening until they're surprised in the chamber, and it frustrates them, and they see the liberty. They see the liberty on this side of the House, where we have a working agreement, a working situation showing British Columbians that two parties, it's interesting again that nobody wrote my speech. I'm actually just going from the cuff there to the member of West Vancouver, Stephen Scott.
This is well prepared.
I don't. Honourable Speaker, here too, you know, the member, it's hard to get a word in with the heckling, but I will say what's interesting here with the comment about the speeches I've heard to this hoist motion, time after time, I wonder if you have one speechwriter downstairs. Because I hear the same examples appearing by 41 Liberal MLAs, time in, time out. The same examples, the same rhetoric. I was actually quite pleased with the member from Peace River North, because I commented, he's gone, but I think he wrote his speech. That's true. The member from Nanaimo, North Cowichan, I have to give you this, said you cannot be said that you're not green opposite because you're into recycling and reusing on the speeches. But coming back to the reason why the amendment is not necessary is what we're showing right now, the hoist motion, what we're showing right now to British Columbians is that yes, parties can work together. They can work together despite being fundamentally different in terms of values, despite having some of the most conflict that we had between these parties in the election campaign. We can show that to British Columbians that we can put people ahead of our partisan narrative. But we see again this morning, as illustrated again, the games, and which is why this is troubling to the BC Liberals. The games that get played. We need to hoist this emotion. We need to hoist this bill to the future because it might affect our power. Everything's a game. And that's what's so sad, Honourable Speaker. That is what's so sad with what's going on here in the legislature, both earlier today as well as now, when we listen to good people, good members opposite, the honourable members opposite, at times just reading scripts given to them by the 20-something-year-olds downstairs, telling them to just make stuff up. At other times, again, I don't want to criticize the member from Vancouver Falls Creek because his speech was very good. It was actually clearly, you wrote it yourself, through you to the chair. Not something that I've heard very often, but it's important, though, to recognize that this ultimately comes down to one question again. This is what the debate is. The debate is one question. Do we trust British Columbians to determine their outcome? Yes or no? The BC Liberals clearly will vote later and say, no, we don't trust British Columbians to determine their outcome. Whereas members on this House will say, yes, we trust British Columbians. We trust you to have a say in your future. We will give you that say in the future, despite the fact that in their quest for a Liberal majority, at all costs, they will suppress the rights of British Columbians to have a say in their democracy. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.